There's an ancient word that carries an almost poetic weight when you stop to think about it. Disaster. When you say, "My life turned into a disaster," you might not realize it, but you're invoking a centuries-old belief about guilt, cosmos, and destiny. Disaster comes from Latin disastro, which literally means without a star or bad star. The Greeks and later the Romans believed that our destiny was written in the heavens, that the stars commanded every step of our existence, and when everything went wrong, when life fell apart, it was because your star had disappeared, because the cosmos had turned its back on you. It wasn't your fault, it was the universe's fault. And maybe it's comforting to think that way, isn't it? Maybe it's easier to believe that something bigger, something outside your control, is responsible for the mess you call your life. Because if it's not the universe, if it's not the stars, then there's only one much harder truth to face. Maybe it's you. And that truth hurts in a way that no external tragedy can hurt, because it takes away your last excuse, your last refuge, your last possibility of hiding behind chance. The ancients lived under this deep conviction that the celestial bodies determined not only great historical events, but also the intimate details of each individual life. Born under such a celestial configuration? Then your fate was already sealed. Your star shone or faded, and you were just a spectator of your own destiny. It was a way of understanding the world that, however limited it may seem now, offered something we still desperately seek today: an explanation, a reason, a purpose for everything that goes wrong. Because it's unbearable to think that things just happen, that there's no greater plan, no cosmic justice, no hidden meaning waiting to be revealed. We'd rather believe that there's something out there controlling everything, even if that something is cruel, even if it's indifferent, because the alternative is to accept that we're alone, navigating in the dark, without a map, without a compass, without a star to guide us. And that's scary. It's scarier than any monster we can imagine, because at least monsters have form, have names, have a way to be fought. But the void, the nothingness, the total absence of meaning, there's no way to fight that. Only accept it. And most of us aren't ready to accept. This vision crossed centuries, shaped religions, philosophies, until it reached Shakespeare, who in a moment of brutal genius put in the mouth of one of his characters a phrase that destroys this cosmic excuse. "The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves." Shakespeare knew what he was doing. He was saying, stop throwing responsibility upward, stop blaming the sky, the gods, destiny. If your life is a tragedy, look inward, not upward. And this shift in perspective is revolutionary, because it takes away the comfort of victimization. It forces you to face the mirror. It forces you to admit that, maybe, just maybe, you're the architect of your own disaster. And that's not easy to swallow. It's much simpler to believe that the universe conspired against you, that you were unlucky, that you were born under a bad star. Because if you accept that it was you, then you also have to accept that it could have been different. That the choices you made or failed to make shape the life you're living now. And that brings a responsibility that most of us prefer to avoid. Nietzsche took this even further. He had no patience whatsoever for this story of cosmic destiny, of greater forces controlling your life, as if you were a puppet in a play written by some bored divinity. For Nietzsche, this idea that the universe has a plan for you, that there's some hidden meaning guiding everything, is not only false, but dangerous. It's an escape. It's a way of not facing the only truth that really matters. You are the only one responsible for your life. Not the cosmos, not God, not destiny, not bad luck. You. And if that sounds heavy, if it sounds unfair, it's because it is. Nietzsche never promised comfort. He promised truth. And the truth, in his view, is that nobody's going to save you. No star is going to shine again to guide you. No God is going to descend from heaven to fix the mess. If your life turned into a disaster, it's not the stars, it's you. And this radical responsibility, this total acceptance that you are the creator of your own existence, is at the same time the scariest and most liberating thing you can experience. Because think about it. If you're not responsible for your life, if everything is destiny's fault, circumstances' fault, other people's fault, then you also have no power to change anything. You're an eternal victim, waiting for something external to improve, waiting for luck to turn, waiting for your star to shine again. And while you wait, life passes. Years pass, and you remain in the same place, blaming the same things, repeating the same patterns, living the same tragedy. But if you accept that you created this disaster, then you can also create something else. You can start over. You can make different choices. You can reinvent yourself. And that, for Nietzsche, is what it means to be truly free. Not the absence of suffering, not the absence of difficulties, but the capacity to create meaning from chaos, to build something beautiful, even amid the ruins. But before you feel like closing this and cursing me out, let me tell you something that Nietzsche proposed, and that I think is one of the most disturbing and at the same time most liberating ideas I've ever read. He imagined a thought experiment, a kind of existential test that forces you to face the truth about how you're living. Imagine that a demon appears to you in the middle of the night, in that moment when you're most vulnerable, most alone, when all masks have fallen and you can no longer deceive yourself about who you really are. And this demon tells you the following: everything you've lived, every moment of joy, every second of shame, every mistake, every victory, every pain, every boredom, every kiss, every betrayal, every loss, every regret, every achievement, you're going to live it again, and again, and again, infinitely, exactly the same way, without changes, without improvements, without the possibility of fixing anything, eternally. Every second of pain you felt, you'll feel again, forever. Every moment of shame, every wrong choice, every lost opportunity, everything will repeat infinitely. Now tell me, what would you feel? Would you curse this demon? Would you cry in despair knowing that you'd have to relive every moment of shame, every relationship that ended badly, every time you betrayed yourself, every time you gave up, every time you chose the easy path even knowing it was wrong? Or would you look at him and say, thank you, because this life, with all its pain and all its beauty, with all its mistakes and all its successes, is worth living again? And before you answer, quickly, before you say, of course I'd accept, just to seem strong, really think about it. Think about every moment of your life. Think about the times you woke up with that feeling of emptiness in your chest, the times you looked in the mirror and didn't like who you saw, the times you lied to yourself, the times you pretended to be okay when you were falling apart inside. Would you accept living all of that again, forever? This is Nietzsche's idea of eternal return. And it's not a prophecy, it's not a religious belief about reincarnation. It's not a physical theory about the universe. It's a brutal philosophical question that serves as a test, as a mirror that forces you to face the truth about how you're living. It's almost as if Nietzsche were holding you by the shoulders, looking into your eyes and asking you, are you truly living or just existing? The life you're living now, with all its imperfections, with all the chaos, with all the lack of meaning you feel, with all the lies you tell yourself, with all the commitments you make but never keep, with all the dreams you abandoned. Is it a life you'd accept living forever? Because if the answer is no, if you can't imagine living all of this again, without falling into despair, if the idea of eternally repeating this existence fills you with horror, then something is fundamentally wrong. Not with the world, not with circumstances, not with luck, with you, with the choices you're making, with the way you're living. And the urgency of this change cannot be postponed. You can't wait for Monday, you can't wait for the new year, you can't wait for the right moment, because the right moment never comes. What comes is the same life, being lived the same way, becoming the same disaster, eternally. You need to act now. You need to create a life that's worthy of being relived. Not a perfect life, because perfection doesn't exist, but an authentic life. A life that's truly yours. A life that, despite all the pain, despite all the suffering, you'd look at and say, yes, I'd accept living this again, because it was worth it. And here's something that Nietzsche understood better than almost any philosopher. Suffering is not a flaw in your life. It's not a system error. It's not a sign that you failed, or that the universe is conspiring against you. Suffering is an inevitable part of existence. It's part of the composition. Nietzsche didn't see life as something that should be without pain, without conflict, without tragedy. He saw life as a work of art, and every great work of art has contrasts, has shadows, has tension. Have you ever stopped to think that a painting without shadow would be flat, without depth, without emotion? It would be just colors scattered on a canvas, without meaning, without impact. The beauty lies precisely in the contrast between light and darkness, in the way shadow gives depth to light, in the way suffering gives meaning to joy. And your life works the same way. Tragedy doesn't ruin the beauty of your existence, it's part of it. The problem isn't suffering. The problem is suffering without creating meaning from it. The problem is letting suffering destroy you instead of transforming you. Making an analogy with music. A perfect chord, without any dissonance, without any tension, might be beautiful for a few seconds, but it soon becomes monotonous, predictable, without emotion. It's the dissonance, the conflict between notes, that creates the tension that makes music interesting, that makes you feel something deep. And then, when resolution finally comes, when harmony is restored, you feel that relief, that beauty, precisely because you experienced the tension before. Your life is this music, suffering is the dissonance. And without it, you wouldn't be able to appreciate the beauty of moments of peace, moments of joy, moments of true connection with another person or with yourself. Because there are two types of suffering, and Nietzsche knew this very well. There's the suffering that crushes you, that paralyzes you, that makes you feel like a helpless victim of destiny. And there's the suffering that builds you, that strengthens you, that forces you to reinvent yourself. The difference between the two isn't in the intensity of the pain, but in the meaning you create from it. You can lose everything and come out of it destroyed, or you can lose everything and come out of it stronger, wiser, more aware of who you really are. And the choice, as hard as it is to accept, is yours. Not always, not in all circumstances, but most of the time, you choose what suffering means. You choose whether it's going to define you or whether you're going to use it as raw material to build something new. Nietzsche said that we don't control the facts, but we control the meaning. You don't control everything that happens to you, that's obvious. You don't control the economy, death, betrayal, loss, illness, the end of relationships, the injustices of the world. But you control what it means to you. You choose whether what happened is going to destroy you or transform you. And this choice, this construction of meaning, is the only true freedom you have. It's the only thing nobody can take from you. Not the universe, not the stars, not God, not circumstances, not other people. You decide what your life means. And if you decide that your life is a disaster without purpose, without beauty, without reason, then that's what it will be. But if you decide to find beauty in the tragedy itself, if you decide to transform your pain into strength, your confusion into clarity, your disaster into a work of art, then you're creating something worth living. And more than that, you're assuming the role of artist of your own existence, which is what Nietzsche believed we should all do. Eternal return isn't just an abstract idea for philosophers to debate in universities while drinking coffee and pretending they understand the meaning of life. It's a way of living. It's a question you should ask yourself every day, maybe every hour. If I had to live this day again, infinitely, would I live it exactly like this? If I had to have this same conversation again, would I say the same words? If I had to make this same choice again, would I choose the same path? And if the answer is no, then change. Change now. Don't wait for Monday. Don't wait for the new year. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait to have more money, more time, more courage. Because the right moment never comes. What comes is the same life, being lived the same way, becoming the same disaster, eternally. And that's the hell that Nietzsche is warning you that you can create for yourself. Not a hell of fire and brimstone like religions describe, but a hell of repetition, of inertia, of living the same mediocre life, the same meaningless existence, forever. And maybe you think, but I can't change, circumstances won't let me, I have responsibilities, I have bills to pay, I have people depending on me, and I understand. I completely understand, but Nietzsche isn't telling you to drop everything and go live on a mountain. He's not telling you to abandon your responsibilities. He's telling you to stop betraying yourself. He's telling you to stop living on autopilot, repeating the same patterns, making the same choices out of fear, out of comfort, out of lack of courage to face who you really are. Because there's a huge difference between living with responsibilities and living while betraying yourself. You can have all the obligations in the world and still live authentically. You can have all the imaginable limitations and still create a life that's worthwhile. It's not about external circumstances. It's about internal honesty. It's about stopping lying to yourself. I remember 2020. I remember the collective collapse we lived through, the feeling that the world had turned upside down, that nothing made sense anymore, that all the certainties we leaned on had crumbled overnight. And I remember my personal crisis within that collective crisis. I felt completely lost. I didn't know anymore what I wanted, what I believed, where I was going, who I was when nobody was watching. And the worst part is that I couldn't even blame the stars, because I knew that wasn't the cause of my confusion. It only exposed what was already there, hidden under a routine that kept me too busy to notice. A routine that worked as anesthesia against the truth. When everything stopped, when the silence got too loud, when there was nowhere left to run, I was forced to face the truth. I was living a life I wouldn't accept reliving. And that hurts. It hurts in a way that cuts deep, that pulls the ground from under you, that leaves you breathless. It hurts to realize that you wasted time, that you made choices out of fear instead of truth, that you betrayed yourself in the name of some security that never came, some approval that was never enough. I spent months in that state, oscillating between moments of brutal clarity and moments of total denial. There were days when I'd wake up and think, I need to change everything. I need to start from scratch. I need to be honest with myself for the first time in my life. And there were days when I'd think, no, everything's fine. It's just a phase. It'll pass. Everyone's confused right now, it's not just me. But deep down, really deep down, I knew I couldn't continue the way I was. I knew that if I didn't change anything, if I simply went back to the same routine when everything went back to normal, I'd be choosing to live that hell of eternal return that Nietzsche described. I'd be choosing to repeat the same mediocre life, the same meaningless existence forever. And that terrified me more than any virus, more than any external crisis. Because the external crisis would pass. But the internal crisis, that would only pass if I did something about it. But there's a strange thing, almost miraculous, that happens when you finally admit this. When you stop blaming the universe, stop waiting for someone or something to save you. When you assume this radical responsibility for your own existence, something changes. It's not magical. It's not instantaneous. It doesn't solve everything at once. But it's real. It's tangible. You realize that if you created this disaster, you can also create something else. You can start over. Not from zero, because life doesn't work that way. Because you can't erase the past. You carry everything you've lived, everything you've suffered, everything you've learned, all the scars, all the marks. But you can decide now that the next chapter will be different. That you're going to live in a way that, if you had to relive it, you'd accept. And that, for me, is what Nietzsche was trying to say. Not that life needs to be perfect, because perfection is an illusion, a trap that paralyzes you, but that it needs to be yours. It needs to be authentic. It needs to be worthwhile. It needs to be something that, when you look back at the end, you don't feel shame, don't feel regret, don't feel like you wasted the only life you had. And there's a phrase by Schiller that I love, and that fits perfectly here. World history is the world's court of judgment. What he meant is that humanity repeats the same mistakes, the same wars, the same injustices, the same nonsense, century after century. We don't learn. We keep doing the same things expecting different results. And when you look at history, when you realize that we don't evolve as much as we like to think, when you see that the same patterns repeat infinitely, it makes you want to give up, doesn't it? It makes you want to think, why try? Why create? Why believe in anything? If everything is repetition, if everything is chaos, if nothing really changes, if humanity is doomed to repeat the same cycles of violence, ignorance, and suffering, then what's the point of trying to be different? What's the point of fighting for a better life when the whole world seems to be falling apart? And I completely understand that feeling. I felt it. I felt that the world was too serious, too heavy, too chaotic for any of my ideas to make a difference. I've been ashamed of my own ideas. I've thought that everything I thought was idiotic, naive, useless in the face of the magnitude of real problems. But you know what I discovered? That this paralysis, this resignation, this passive acceptance that nothing matters, is exactly what Nietzsche was warning about. It's nihilism in its most destructive form. When you let the weight of the world crush you, When you give up creating meaning. When you accept that your life is a disaster and do nothing about it. When you drown in the idea that nothing you do matters. You're choosing to live in the hell of repetition. You're choosing to be this version of yourself that's not worth being relived. You're choosing the easiest path, which is to choose nothing. And maybe you think, but I have no choice. Circumstances force me. The world is like this. I'm just one person. My actions won't change anything. My life is insignificant in the grand scheme of things. And I tell you, you're right. You're just one person. Your life, in the context of the universe, is a tiny point, almost invisible. But that person is you. And you're the only thing you really have control over. You're not going to change the whole world. You're not going to fix history. You're not going to save humanity. But you can fix your own life. You can create an existence that's dignified, that's beautiful, that's yours. And that, however small it may seem, however insignificant it may seem in the face of the world's problems, is everything. It's all you can do. And it's enough. And here's the most beautiful and scariest thing of all. Despite everything, despite the collective chaos, despite the widespread anxiety, despite the climate crisis, despite political polarization, despite the feeling that the world is on fire while everyone's arguing about irrelevant things on anti-social networks, despite all this external madness, it's still you. This core, this identity, this I that looks in the mirror and recognizes someone there, that feels, that thinks, that suffers, that loves, that doubts, still exists. It might be hurt, it might be confused, it might be exhausted, it might be doubting everything, but it's still there, intact, waiting. And that, for Nietzsche, is the beginning, not the end, not defeat, not the final disaster, the beginning. Because as long as you exist, as long as you're alive, as long as you can breathe, think, feel, you have the possibility to create, to change, to reinvent yourself, to start over. It doesn't need to be grandiose. It doesn't need to be revolutionary. It doesn't need to change the world. It just needs to be true. It needs to be something that, if you had to live again, you'd accept. And maybe you're thinking, but what if I don't know where to start? What if I'm so lost I don't even know who I am anymore? What if I've already wasted so much time that it doesn't make sense to try anymore? What if I've already made so many wrong decisions that there's no way to fix it? What if I've already hurt so many people that I don't deserve a second chance? What if I'm too old, too young, too tired, too scared? And I understand that perfectly. I've been in that place. I've looked in the mirror and not recognized the person there. I've felt it was too late, that I'd made too many wrong decisions, that I'd lost too many opportunities, that there was no fixing it, that I had to accept that this was my life now, and that's it. But you know what I learned? That being lost isn't the end, it's the beginning. Because when you're lost, when you're no longer sure of anything, when all your convictions have crumbled, when you don't know who you are anymore or what you want, you finally have the freedom to ask yourself, who do I really want to be? Not who others expect me to be, not who my parents wanted me to be, not who society says I should be, not who I thought I needed to be accepted, but who I want to be, really, deep down, when nobody's watching. And this question, this terrible and beautiful freedom, is what Nietzsche was offering. Well, in the first pinned comment I'm going to leave something for you. That helps me, and maybe it can help you too. But there's something interesting about being lost. We associate this feeling with failure, with error, with something that should be avoided at all costs. But think about it. When you're lost, you're open to new paths. When you have absolute certainty about where you're going, you go in a straight line, ignoring all other possibilities, all other paths that could take you to infinitely more interesting places. Certainty traps you. Doubt frees you. And being lost is simply being in doubt about which path to follow. And that's not weakness. It's courage. Because it's much easier to keep going on the same old path, even if it takes you to a place you don't want to go, than to stop, admit you're lost, and have the courage to look for a new path. He wasn't saying it would be easy. He wasn't promising you'd find quick answers or that everything would magically fall into place, like in a movie where the protagonist has an epiphany and suddenly everything makes sense. He was saying you have to take responsibility for your own existence. That you have to stop waiting for the universe to give you a sign. That you have to stop waiting for someone to come save you. That you have to create your own star instead of waiting for one to appear in the sky. And that's scary. It's terrifying, actually. It's much easier to blame destiny, blame circumstances, blame others, blame bad luck, blame everything except yourself. But it's also much emptier. Because when you live like that, when you refuse to take responsibility for your own life, you're never really free. You're always a victim, always waiting, always lost, always blaming something external for your unhappiness, and life passes, and you realize you wasted years, decades even, waiting for something that never came, waiting for the world to change, waiting for circumstances to align perfectly, waiting until you finally felt ready. And then, is it too late? No, it's never too late. As long as you're alive, you can change. You can start over. You can create a life worth living. Not tomorrow. Not when you have more money. Not when you have more time. Now. And there's something Nietzsche talked about a lot that I think is fundamental. You need to love your fate. Amor fati, he called it. Love of fate. And that doesn't mean passively accepting everything that happens as if you were a puppet without will of your own. It means embracing your life, with everything good and bad it has, with all the mistakes you made and all the victories you achieved, and deciding that you're going to transform this into something beautiful. That you're going to find meaning even in suffering, even in loss, even in confusion, even in the darkest moments. Because suffering will exist anyway. Loss will exist. Confusion will exist. Death will exist. Pain will exist. That's not optional. It's part of being alive. The question is, are you going to let that destroy you, or are you going to use it as raw material to build something new? Are you going to spend your whole life as a victim of circumstances, or are you going to become the artist of your own existence? Amor fati isn't naive optimism. It's not that toxic positivity that tells you to always smile, to pretend everything's okay when it's not, to deny the reality of pain. It's exactly the opposite. It's looking at pain head-on. It's recognizing suffering for what it is. It's admitting that life is hard, that you're going to lose things and people you love, that you're going to fail, that you're going to regret, that you're going to suffer. And even so, even knowing all this, deciding it's worth it, that you love this life, with all its imperfections, with all its pain, because it's the only life you have. And wasting it waiting for it to be different, waiting for the pain to disappear, waiting for everything to finally make sense, is the greatest tragedy of all, because you spend your whole life waiting to start living. And when you finally realize there's no perfect moment, that life is now, with all its mess and all its beauty, it's already too late. And I know this might sound like a cliché, might sound like cheap self-help, might sound like those pieces of advice everyone gives but nobody really understands, but it carries a deep truth that most people avoid facing. Because the alternative of not taking this responsibility, is to live eternally in disaster. It's waking up every day feeling your life has no meaning, that you're trapped, that there's no way out, that you're doomed to repeat the same mistakes, the same patterns, the same bad choices. And that's not life. That's just existing. It's just passing time until death arrives. And you deserve more than that. You deserve to live a life that, if you had to relive it infinitely, you'd accept. Not because it's perfect. Not because it has no pain. Not because everything worked out. But because it's yours. Because you created it with your own hands. With your own choices. With your own courage. Even when you were scared. Even when you didn't know if it would work. Even when everyone said you were crazy. And maybe you'll discover, in the end, that being lost wasn't the problem. The problem was thinking someone was going to find you. The problem was waiting for a star to shine in the sky to show you the way, to tell you what to do, to give you certainty that you're in the right place, doing the right thing, being the right person. But it won't. There's no star. There's no map. There's no instruction manual for life. There's only you, with your doubts, your fears, your hopes, your scars. And maybe that's enough. Maybe you're enough. Not to save the world, not to change history, not to be perfect, but to create a life worth living. And that, in the end, is all that matters. It's the only thing that really matters. So I ask you, and I ask you to answer honestly, without deceiving yourself, without pretending. If you had to live your life exactly as it is now, with all its flaws, all its regrets, all its pains, infinitely, would you accept? If the answer is yes, then congratulations, you're living authentically, you're creating something worthy of being relived. But if the answer is no, if the idea of living your current life eternally fills you with despair, with anguish, with the urge to scream, then what are you going to do about it? Because time is passing, and you can keep waiting for something external to change, for the stars to align, for the universe to give you a sign, or you can start now. You can keep blaming destiny, circumstances, others, or you can become your own star. You can keep living on autopilot, repeating the same patterns, making the same choices out of fear, or you can wake up and create something new. And when you finally understand this, when you take this radical responsibility for your existence, something changes. Not everything, not all at once, but something. And sometimes, something is enough to begin. It's enough to get you out of paralysis. It's enough to give you courage to take the first step, even without knowing exactly where you're going. Because the truth is, nobody knows where they're going. Nobody has all the answers. Nobody has a perfect plan. Everyone's kind of improvising, trying to figure things out as they happen, making mistakes, learning, growing, and that's okay. It doesn't need to be perfect. It just needs to be true. Make your choices consciously and remember, there's no path without pain, but you choose which pain to carry. The pain of changing, or the pain of staying the same forever. The pain of facing your hardest truths, or the pain of living lying to yourself. The pain of taking responsibility, or the pain of being eternally a victim. The pain of trying and maybe failing, or the pain of never having tried. And this choice, this one choice that only you can make, defines everything. It defines who you are. It defines the life you live. It defines whether you're creating something worthy of being relived or just repeating the same disaster eternally, like a nightmare from which you never wake up. Because there's something about these two pains that most people don't realize. Both hurt, both wound, both take you out of comfort. But the pain of changing, however intense it may be, has an end. It transforms you. It takes you somewhere. The pain of staying the same, that silent and constant pain of living a life that isn't yours, of waking up every day knowing you're betraying yourself, that pain has no end. It extends eternally. And the worst part is that it atrophies you. It doesn't take you anywhere. You just stay there, suffering quietly, convincing yourself you have no choice, that things are just like this, that you have to accept. But you don't. You always have a choice. Maybe not about what happens to you, but about what you do with what happens. And that's the difference between being alive and just existing. And despite all the chaos, despite all the confusion, despite feeling completely lost in the middle of the storm, it's still you. There's still a core there, an identity, an I that resists, that survives, that continues, despite everything. And you're more than enough to begin. You always were. You just needed to stop looking for stars in the sky and realize that the light you need is already inside you. And maybe that's the most important lesson of all. You don't need to wait for anything external to start truly living. You don't need more money, more time, more courage, more knowledge, more support. You don't need circumstances to be perfect, the stars to align, someone to give you permission. You already have everything you need. You have you. And that, however simple it may seem, however obvious it may seem, is everything. Because when you finally understand that the only person who can create meaning in your life is you, when you stop waiting for something or someone to come save you, you become free in a way you never were before. Free to make mistakes. Free to try. Free to start over. Free to be who you really are, without masks, without excuses, without fear. If this video made you reflect on your own life, on the choices you've been making, on the type of existence you're building, on whether you're living a life that would be worth reliving, leave a like down below. And subscribe to the channel, because we're going to keep exploring these ideas that disturb, that challenge, that make you think, that take you out of your comfort zone, that force you to face difficult truths about yourself and about the world. That's the kind of content we bring here, week after week. And I truly thank you for staying until here, for having the courage to face these reflections, for not looking away. Until the next video.